So what we are going to talk about today is just finishing up a couple pieces related to ecology, and then if we have time, we'll be moving into how humans affect their environment, how humans impact their environment. So what we're talking about here is something that's called symbiosis. This is when two species have a close relationship and live in or on one another. And there's three types of symbiosis that we're going to talk about: parasitism, mutualism, and commensalism. So, parasitism, this is what we just talked about, parasites. And in parasitism, one organism lives on or in another, and the parasite is benefiting. It's getting something positive out of this relationship, but the host, which the parasite's living in or on, the host is being harmed in some way.
Oh, what do you mean?
I'm going to pass around, this is my zoology textbook from college, and it has some good examples of some parasite infections. This one shows a person's brain that was affected by a type of tapeworm that burrows into your brain and lays eggs there. And then eventually they hatch into other parasites. This page shows a roundworm parasite that's clogged up the intestines of a pig so much food couldn't even go through it. And then this page shows a worm that causes, that instead of living in the digestive system, it lives in the circulatory system. It lives off of an organism's blood, and it can grow so large as it reproduces, it clogs up the heart. If you have a dog and you give it like HeartGard tablets, little medicine, it's to prevent this worm. This shows a dog's heart, and all the white stuff is the worm sort of clogging up the heart so it can't work anymore. That's why you give your dog those medicines. I'll pass this around. So many parasites, we often think of worms. You ever watch that show Monsters Inside of Me?
Yes.
Often deals with parasites. Sometimes they're worms. But a tapeworm is a good example. A tapeworm is a worm that lives usually in the digestive system. And as the host is eating food, as it goes through the digestive system, the tapeworm attaches there and it absorbs some of that nutrition that the host ate. But as it absorbs more and more nutrients, it grows larger, reproduces, it starts to use up more and more of the host's food. And so the host actually gets less and starts to get sick because of its lack of nutrition. They reproduce often by a little section of the tapeworm breaking off, and it comes out when the animal goes to the bathroom. Like, did I tell you about when my dog had tapeworm?
Yes,
She went to the bathroom. I looked down at the little pile she left, and there's a little thing on there about the size of a grain of rice, like moving around. And I knew it was a tapeworm. We had to just give her a pill to help her. But if another dog from my neighborhood was like coming around my yard, sniffing around, smelling where my dog went to the bathroom, then it could ingest that little section, and then it would be infected with this tapeworm. And that's how they spread from animal to animal.
My neighbor has a dog, and like when it pooped out once, like it was all worms in it, like those little worms you see.
Yeah, well, one of my dogs, we got very young. She hadn't been dewormed yet. Almost all puppies get infected with worms soon after birth, and you have to give them a special medication. It's called deworming them. Usually, if you get a dog, they do it at the breeder or at the pet store or at the vet. But for my dog, she hadn't been dewormed, so we had to give her the medicine. And about 12 hours after we gave her the medicine, when she went to the bathroom, it looked like a plate of spaghetti. There was tons of these worms coming out of her. The medicine helped kill them and get rid of them. They were longer than her whole body. So, yeah, it's pretty gross.
Don't you like eat a lot but like don't gain weight?
Yeah, because the worms are using up the nutrients of the food they're eating. You know, there's other, it's not just worms, but like a flea that burrows into an animal's skin and like lives off their blood, that's a parasite. A leech is a parasite. So the parasite benefits, but the host is harmed in some way.
Is like the host, can the host like not feel it sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes, for a while, especially in the beginning stages, the host might not have any idea that they have an infection, but eventually they probably start to become sick and weaken. All right, mutualism is another type of symbiosis. However, this is when both organisms involved in a relationship, when they both benefit. They're both getting something positive out of it. This is a picture of the Nile crocodile. It's this ferocious predator. It's a carnivore. It eats just about anything that moves. However, it opens up its mouth and allows this tiny little Egyptian plover bird to crawl inside of its mouth and peck around in there. And it never harms it at all. And it's because they have a mutualistic relationship. What is the crocodile getting out of this?
Massage?
Not close. Yeah, clean teeth, so that the stuff isn't around its tooth decaying. What does the bird get?
Food.
Yeah, it gets a little meal out of it. So they're both benefiting. This is mutualism.
So like they're like best friends.
Nemo. Where does Nemo live?
It's like visiting at Shaq's.
Yeah, in the sea anemone. They have a mutualistic relationship. Now, the clownfish, it's called, lives inside of the tentacles. And usually those tentacles have stinging cells. It's like a hydra or a jellyfish. But the clownfish is immune to it. It has special mucus on its scales that it's not harmed by these stinging cells. So it can live inside of there no problem. What does the clownfish get? How is it benefiting? Have you?
Protection.
It's protected. Predators aren't going to chase it into the sea anemone because they'll get hurt by these stinging cells. What does the sea anemone get?
Nutrients.
Yeah, it gets nutrients as the clownfish eats food and it falls. As it goes back in the sea anemone, it can use some of those nutrients. So they're both benefiting. I'll show you some other examples in a minute of mutualism. And then we have commensalism. In commensalism, one organism benefits and the other is not really affected either way. It doesn't help it, it doesn't harm it, it's just not really affected. An example are barnacles that live on a whale. A barnacle is a sea creature, and they're filter feeders. And often they'll attach to a whale or a turtle and kind of hitch a ride on it. As they're hitching a ride through the water, they can filter food out of the water, they can move from place to place, so they benefit. But it doesn't really hurt the whale, it doesn't help the whale, it's just not really effective. So that would be an example of commensalism. A robin building a nest in a tree. The robin is benefiting by having that as a home for protection, but the tree is not affected negatively by having the nest there. That would be commensalism. These two fish, these are fish. They kind of look like leeches and they sort of act like leeches. These are lamprey. Those fish with the really sharp mouth, they have no jaw. Their teeth are like a drill. They basically drill a hole in the side of a fish and they attach there and they digest its blood. They're parasites. They're harming this lake trout and they're benefiting.
Wait, so it doesn't feel it?
Well, it does, but it can't do anything about it. It's a fish. It doesn't have any arms to like grab them off. This we'll see a video in a minute. This is a goby fish and the shrimp. They live together. They have a mutualistic relationship. This shrimp digs a burrow that they both live in, a little home for them. Okay? And so the goby gets a place to live. The shrimp doesn't see very well. So what happens is when the shrimp needs to go find some food, it comes out of its burrow, and the goby goes with it, keeping a watch for any predators. And the shrimp keeps its antenna in contact so it knows if the goby goes back in the burrow, the shrimp goes with it. So the goby's sort of looking out and protecting it from predators.
So
So it gets protection, the goby gets a living space.
the shrimp is like blind.
Yeah, pretty much. This is a barnacle on a sea turtle. Again, it gets a ride through the water, it filters food, but it doesn't hurt the turtle. It doesn't help it. This is commensalism. This is a polar bear affected by a parasitic tapeworm. It's so skinny and emaciated because its digestive system is clogged up with these tapeworms. They're absorbing all the nutrients. It's more difficult for food to move through there. So this bear is in a bad situation. It's probably close to death, I would say. We'll see a video about these. These are hermit crabs, which actually pick up sea anemones and put them on its shell so that it's protected from predators.
Wait, are they affected by it?
The sea anemones?
Like, can they get shocked by it?
Nope. Well, they can, but they pick it up by the base where there are no sting cells, and they put it on its back. And it gets protected, and the sea anemones can eat little bits of food from the hermit crab. And last, this is like the plover and the crocodile. This is a water buffalo, and these birds just sort of sit on its back, and they peck little insects and things out of its fur, and they keep it clean, whereas the birds get a little bit of a meal out of it, so this is mutualism. So you're watching a video about some of these mutualism examples. Organism does, what it eats, when it's active, all these little factors about it form its niche. So you know, white-tailed deer's niche, it's active in the daytime. It eats small plants on the ground. It lives in forests and around lakes and fields and so forth. So that's its niche. Its habitat is sort of the location where it lives. Now in the deer's habitat, okay, there might be other species, but probably they don't have the same niche as the deer. Most of the times, organisms can share the same habitat, but they usually don't share the niche. For example, a heron, a big bird that lives in the same habitat, it eats different things. The heron eats fish, whereas the deer eats plants. So they don't have the same niche. What do you think would happen if they did? What if the heron and the deer both wanted the exact same things in the exact same place at the exact same time? Hey. Avery? They fight over it, and we have a word for that. They would compete. They would be both trying to get the same thing, and maybe, most likely, one of them would win. One would do better. And probably the other would either have to find another niche, or it would die off. Now, if we imagine our courtyard out here, in the middle of our school, if they stop mowing it for a year, what do you think that courtyard would look like in 1 year from now? Tyler?
The grass will be really high.
The grass would be really high, yeah. How about 5 years?
There would be animals out there.
Well, would it just be grass? The grass just wouldn't go taller and taller, right?
There'd be animals out there.
Some animals may start to move in. What about the plants? Would they look any different?
No.
There'd be taller plants. Maybe some like bushes and stuff. Some woody plants. Some taller plants. How about after 15 years?
Oh, that'd just be like a jungle.
Well, what do you mean by a jungle?
There'd be a whole bunch of animals.
Taller things, more what? Trees. You know, it starts off as little saplings that start to grow, they get bigger. And after maybe 100 years, it would be probably a forest, just like the surrounding of our school is basically a forest. The areas that are left undisturbed in our area eventually turn into a forest. If you had a field and a farm around here and you stopped farming it all together and just let it sit, in 100 years or so, it's going to be a forest. It goes through a series of stages that we call succession. In ecosystems, after they're disturbed, they go through this gradual change of ecosystems. So let's say my farm example. If a farmer plows his fields, it's just soil, and then leaves it. What would the first things that start to grow be, you think? little small plants, grasses, things like that. We call those small organisms that come in first the pioneer organism. It's the pioneer community. It's the first things that can establish themselves. I went hiking yesterday up Black Bear Mountain. And at the top of the mountain is basically bare rock. But in certain areas, there are actually some tiny little things growing. Lichen, mosses. They are the pioneer communities. They're able to grow in those conditions. Eventually, other things can start to grow. And over a long period of time, it eventually goes back to reach what we call the climax community. The climax community is sort of the final, stable, last stage of development that ecosystems will reach. What is it in our area? What's the climax community? We left things undisturbed. It'd be a forest. But it's not always a forest. You know, if you go into the Midwestern parts of the United States, the climax community is a grassland. If you go up in Canada, the climax community is a conifer forest. If you go into the Southwest United States, the climax community is a desert. So it depends on the climate will determine what the climax community is. Here, okay. Here's an example. This is what I was seeing on Black Bear Mountain. At the top of the mountain was basically bare rock, but there were some lichens and mosses growing. As they grew bigger and started to break down, they'd form a thin layer of soil, and then some small grasses and herbs would start to grow. Eventually, some seedlings, some small trees would start to establish themselves. Then fast-growing trees, and then slower-growing trees, until eventually you're at the climax community. This even happens in ponds. Ponds, over a period of time, gradually fill in with sediment until they're completely a terrestrial ecosystem, gone from water to land, and eventually can turn into, a land ecosystem because these sediments build up over a period of time. Bella? Yeah. All right, tomorrow we'll talk about human impacts. Oh wait, look at this real quick. This shows, this is right after a forest fire. 1 year later, pioneers are starting to come in. Wow.